Today, I want to show you how I went from this single family property to 55 rentable units in a span of 5 years and how I did it using very little of my own money, and it starts now. I'm Jonathan Beasley, the author of Seller Secrets: How to Sell Your Hampton Roads Home for Top Dollar with Great Terms in the shortest amount of time possible. And more specifically, I'm your insider into the world of real estate investing. Today, I want to share my story with you because frankly, I've kind of kept it under wraps because it's kind of weird to talk about money and that sort of thing, but I'm over that shit. Because I want you to give double middle fingers to poverty and to the man and to the working stiff life. So I started with almost nothing and ended up with a pretty decent rental portfolio, and it's still growing. That's the most important thing, is I'm still growing. Now, it's not to say that you need to follow my exact path, because to be honest, for most of it, we were extremely aggressive. It was a stressful way to go. Every time I created a liquidity event, which is essentially refinancing or selling a property, I would use almost every dollar to put back into real estate. So a metaphor like this would be being at the craps table, and every time you get a winning roll, you push all of your chips back in. Don't necessarily recommend it. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's kind of one of those things, if you're gonna be dumb, you gotta be tough. But that said, there's a lot that you could probably learn from our story, and the difference between what I did and going into a casino is that if you're a savvy investor, you can tip the odds enormously in your favor, as opposed to being a victim of the house always wins philosophy. Now, as I go through this video, I ask for just please a couple quick favors. First of all, if you like this and this is helpful content, please click the little thumbs up below the video. If you think this video adds value to the world or to you, just do us a favor, subscribe to the channel. We actually are thinking about putting together a Facebook group where I give out advice to anyone that has deals, but I would need enough people that join and enough of a following to make that make sense. So, all right, on to the story. Here's how I went from 0 doors to currently 55 doors and still growing. Our story, and I say ours because my wife and my kids actually have been with us this entire journey. And the first one, it began with a house hack. So I say house hack in quotations because that's essentially where you live in a home as a primary residence and then rent out another portion of it in a way to offset living expenses and or save money. So Rachel and I did this before we ever even knew that house hacking was a thing. And there's 3 really cool things about a house hack. Number 1, because we lived in part of the property, it's called a primary residence, we got a really good interest rate because the loans are different when you live in the property versus if it's strictly an investment only loan. So we had to bring very little money to the closing table, and it was a federally insured FHA loan, which had great terms. It also came with the added benefit of being a 30-year fixed mortgage, which meant the monthly payment was lower than, say, a 20-year or a 15-year mortgage. Now, there's arguments to be made about which of those is more advantageous, but for the sake of early on cash flow and growing a portfolio, the 30-year note was great. And this is something that you can do. Just talk to a lender, pick up the phone, call a lender, comment below, we can connect you with someone. And secondly, we were there for almost half the cost of our actual mortgage. So you see, the mortgage payment that we had was like $1,211 a month or something like that. But we had this detached garage. It was an oversized 2-car detached garage with a room above that we finished ourselves. Actually, it was already finished when we bought it. We just kind of cleaned it up and fixed it up and made it look pretty. The people that we moved in paid us over, I think it was like $650 a month. So it was over 50% of our actual mortgage payment. Cut it in half, which was a big deal for us. And I truly credit this very first house hack years ago as the genesis of what is to become, hopefully, a future real estate empire that maybe our kids will inherit or our grandkids will inherit someday. The third reason the house hacking is so cool, and it's a great way to start, is it gave us hands-on training of being landlord. We had someone living in our backyard, and if there was an issue, they would call us. It was kind of like riding a bike with training wheels because we lived there and we were Johnny on the spot with any issues that came up, and there was a lot of growing pains, but it made it easy to be right there to fix any issues as they arose. We had an insane level of commitment to become financially free through real estate investing. So if you're thinking it's kind of crazy to turn your backyard into a rental property, you're not wrong. There were times where it was stressful and weird, but we were committed to doing whatever it took to begin growing our real estate holdings. So after a couple of years of experience as a landlord and beginning to understand understand things like leases and tenant and landlord law. What's the best way to collect rent? How do you track your books and so forth? We really started to fall in love with the idea of rental properties and cash flow. That is the money that you bring in excess to the actual expenses of the property itself. That first property gave us an immense amount of confidence to know that we could certainly do more. I mean, if we could acquire one unit, we could acquire and manage another unit, right? And start moving towards financial freedom. Didn't seem like rocket science to us. So we set out to start buying more properties. Now, this is back in 2016, about 5.5 years ago, and the market has essentially been in an upward trend ever since. And frankly, it still isn't showing any signs of retreat yet by any significant indicator that I can find. So that's something to take note of. So we started pretty much devouring any content that we could on investing and cash flowing properties. I discovered a couple things. First of all, adding a partner to a deal could really help in getting a loan where we couldn't. Your debt to income ratio is something that all of your lenders are going to look at. So bringing in a net worth partner or someone that looks really good on paper can be extremely helpful. And secondly, we could buy a fixer-upper property with short-term money. Listen to me, because this is actually the biggest key in this entire video. We use a hard money loan or a private money loan and then rehab the property, rent it out, and then from there refinance it to a low interest fixed loan and pay off the original hard money loan. Later, I'd find out that this strategy actually has an acronym known as BRRRR. It's the BRRRR strategy. I think Bigger Pockets coined that term. And to this day, it's a strategy that many savvy investors, including myself, continue to use. I've used it over and over and over to build our portfolio, even graduating out of smaller single families and smaller multifamilies into apartment investing. But I digress. Let me get back to the story and the process of how we got to where we are. After that first house hack, we saved up some money, about $50,000, and that's when I consider that our actual investment journey really began, because we went from living in a property to actually purchasing property that was investment purposes only. We BRRRR'd that first house, and we used the proceeds to buy another single family, and then another single family, and patiently waiting to find the very best deals we could, because at the time I was super scared of making a mistake. And in hindsight, I was probably too scared, and I might have actually robbed myself of some of the joy of the process because I was stressing out all the time about pushing all those chips back onto the table. I knew that we had limited capital, but I think I took it to the extreme, because what I know now that I didn't know then is that real estate is extremely forgiving. And here's why. Real estate goes up over time. Rents go up over time. Values go up over time, but your debt goes down. Not to mention there's some great tax benefits to boot. You essentially have all four levers working in your favor when you invest. So as we continue to do this over and over, after some time passed, we began to develop a sort of reputation here locally, in a good way, as being savvy investors that knew what they were doing and treated their private lenders and partners very well. We always made sure that the people that loaned us money made their money first. So fast forward to last year, we had the opportunity to purchase a 15-unit property in Williamsburg, Virginia. It was in extreme distress, termites, roaches, you name it. It was disgusting when we bought it. So guess what strategy we used? If you guessed BRRRR, you'd be right. We're almost all the way done with our renovations of the property. The units, the final units are getting renovated. We're leasing them up, and we're going to refinance, pay back our short-term lender, and then hold the property long-term and keep the cash flow. All the proceeds that we're gonna get, guess what we're gonna do with those? Push them back into the middle of the table and go buy another property. So at this point, we're 5 years in, we have 33 units that under ownership, and now have our largest property to date under contract. We have a 22-unit apartment, and you guessed it, it's a reposition. It's gonna be a BRRRR. Oh, by the way, BRRRR means buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. So when we close on this property, we're gonna have 55 doors under management with another 14-unit condo deal in escrow that we plan to close on over the summer. So at this point, some of the properties we bought 5 years ago, we're now starting to sell because of appreciation. We've seen so much appreciation that it's our best move to go ahead and sell them, take the equity, and begin to redeploy that capital. So we're starting to look at other avenues to invest. Particularly, we're interested in Airbnb vacation rentals in areas that we think are gonna show strong demand over the next coming years. While my initial goal was to get to 100 units, and that's still sort of a goal of mine, really my primary focus at this point is to get to a certain monthly cash flow number so that Rachel and I can live life on our terms. And life on our terms means absolute freedom and mobility. Something that COVID showed us is the fact that the world's probably much closer to being extremely mobile than we ever thought possible. And working from an office really is a bit of an outdated, particularly in certain industry segments. So having a place in a warmer climate, let's say Clearwater, Florida, or somewhere down south, so that we can hang out for there a few months in the winter sounds really good to me. And guess what? Once we get there, we're not going to be done. So why do I share this story with you? It's not to brag, I promise. I get no pleasure out of like showing off or anything. Well, maybe I get some pleasure, but that's not the point. One primary reason I do this is because sometimes it can be really hard to see how like one deal or two deals at the beginning of a journey is gonna lead to any sort of financial freedom or wealth at all. But matter of fact, I'm trying to get DMAC into investing. I gotta keep pulling him along because he's busy writing the books and doing all this creative stuff. But eventually, I'm gonna get him into it. And here's the thing, it's hard to get moving. Momentum is difficult. It takes a ton of energy and you have to crawl before you start walking. But once it picks up speed, it can get there easier and faster. 1 turns into 2, 2 turns into 4, 4 turns into 10, 10 turns into 55. And I don't know what the future might hold for me and Rachel. So if you're at the beginning of this journey, I hope it gives you some motivation to continue pushing through, to keep learning and to keep growing. Even when it's hard, just do something every day to work on your investing business and you'll eventually get there. I have a friend that's a expert level black belt jiu-jitsu practitioner and instructor, and one of my favorite comments that I've ever heard him say is this: a black belt is nothing but a white belt. They just never gave up. If you like this video, again, please hit the thumbs up, comment below if you have a question, and by all means subscribe. I'd love to connect with you. I'm trying to connect with 1,000 new investors to inspire people to begin their own wealth building and financial freedom journey. I'm Jonathan Beasley with That Fit Team, professionals in real estate and passionate about people. See you next week.